Hi everyone, my name is Hamza Jamil and I'm a committee member of the Enabling Change Specific Interest Group. And on behalf of the APM, welcome you to this webinar. I'll shortly be handing over to Kuldip and Paul, who will be presenting on digital transformation. But before that, just a little bit about our SIG. The SIG was established in 2014 to improve the change capability of organizations, teams, and individuals. Last year, we launched our guide, which you can find on the APM site. And earlier this year, we actually had our all-day London event, which I'm pleased to say was very well received, as indeed was our guide. So please do have a look at that guide. As of today, we're just shy of 700 community members, and we are spread across 4 practitioner groups, those being transport, public services, utilities, and manufacturing. If you'd like to get involved, you can have a look at our microsite. It's available through the APM main website, and you can also find us through the usual social media channels as well. So with that, I will now pass over to Kuldip.
Thank you, Hamza and Maya. Welcome everybody to this webinar. I'd just like to thank everybody for participating. This afternoon I'm going to be leading a presentation with my colleague Paul as we talk around the challenges around digital transformation in UK higher education. We're going to be looking at some of the trends, challenges, an actual case study, and provide some practical advice on the transformational journeys that you might be embarking on using digital as the context. So our storyline that we've developed, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the UK higher education sector as it is today. Then we're going to move into, as you can see on the screen there, a little bit around the challenges and some of the things that we've seen other businesses and business models and digital business models that have emerged across industries. And then how digital disruption is impacting HE and the significant challenges around student satisfaction, retention, and attraction. And then move into what does that actually mean in terms of digitalization or digital adoption. And we're going to look at an example, Russell Group University, and some of the steps that they've taken to move into this digital world that we all talk about, and finish off with some practical steps, next steps. So the UK higher education sector is a major contributor to the UK economy. As you'll see on this slide, it has, in 2016-17 generated something close to £35 billion of revenue. It's a sector that's larger than the legal sector and the marketing sectors. It contributes to something close to 2.6% of the economic activity across the UK. It has something close to 136 UK universities and institutions, I should say. A quarter of those institutions have students that are above 20,000 students, be postgraduates and undergraduates, and 2/3 of those universities have incomes of above 100 million. I think the largest kind of Russell Group universities have revenues over $1 million. An increasing trend that we've seen over the years is that a lot of the income now that's been generated within HE is really from student fees, something close to 54% now, and that's obviously had a massive dramatic effect on the market conditions and how universities operate. And just want to say that it also has a lot of benefits. The academic research and the products and innovation that emerge from UK institutions have a massive impact on the UK economy and further afield across the world. And as a kind of finishing bit on this bit, I think it's very important that we continue to educate our future leaders, and we should not fail them. With that said, just a quick snapshot of universities. Here's some of them. As I said, there's 136 of them. We've got something like 2.3 million UK students, and There is a top 24 kind of very elitist group called the Russell Group, and there's some of them there highlighted. And I'm hoping we have some academics, maybe students and staff members from UK institutions on the call, and hopefully you can recognise where your university is. So that just kind of gives you an overview of the sector. Now, what we're going to just walk through is some of the kind of the changes that we've seen across what we describe the kind of the digital economy and the kind of business models that have developed. And every calls this the fourth generation of digital, and what's driving that change. So the world's changed. As I said, we're in this industrial revolution, coming in as digital. On the backdrop of that, we've had economic uncertainty and change, and I think there's also been political and social instability. The UK is moving out of Europe with Brexit upon us. We've had massive changes with the adoption of technology, and there's more coming. From AI to robotics to blockchain, various trends that we've emerged. And I think the economic instability that's risen is also changing some of the demographics that we can see as we go forward. So let me just try to describe that digital change. The digital change, in my layman's way of describing it, has all been about transforming the customer experience. I think the biggest driver for change, certainly in this example that I'm going to show you here, if we think of the horse and the cart 100 years ago, had very little software, very little code, none. And then we had the late 1920s, 30s, we had a car, which had maybe some very much mechanical component parts, very little software. And what we have on the far right-hand side here is the Tesla. The Tesla car hopefully will be the first driverless car, and it's pretty much software intensive. It has I don't know how many millions lines of code, and what we see here is that transition from being a tech-enabled product to becoming technology-centric. And as we've moved from those products and services in the marketplace, that by developing those new services, we've had to work in different ways. We've had to use different skill sets. We've had different roles and responsibilities in our jobs. We've had to develop in different ways, and that migration or that transition over time has changed the way that we actually deliver those products and services. And that's what's driving this change, and the adoption of technology has rapidly increased. And just to give you a flavor of how that technology adoption has increased and therefore has changed the way that we work in this digital world, I'll ask a few questions as a quick poll.
How long did it take for the aircraft industry to get to 50 million users? Along a similar theme, how long did it take for Twitter to get to 50 million users? How long did it take for Pokemon Go to get to the same total 50 million users? Aircraft, the highest response was 86 years, so that took over half of the response, so at 54% the audience believed. For Twitter, this time they thought that it took 2 years and was 53% of the responses.
Mm-hmm.
And for Pokemon Go, it was a much higher percentage. We had 85% thought that it took just 19 days.
Sure, thank you for that. You've done very well. Here's the answers. It took 68 years to get to 50 million product users of the aircraft, 2 years for Twitter and 19 days for Pokemon Go. I think that pretty much tells you that the rapid adoption of technology, the pace of change from a technology perspective is driving our industries. If you're still not convinced, I just want to show you this slide. This is what happens in an internet minute between 2017 and 2018. And I hope you can see from the visual graphics there that I just want to pick up on WhatsApp. It's gone from 16 million text messages last year to something like 38 million messages, with not only just text messages, but video messages and all sorts. The rapid adoption of that kind of technology is just changing the landscape in terms of collaboration and communication perspective. I think hopefully you're convinced that the pace of change from a technology perspective is paramount. But there's more than that. Then there's the rise of the bots. We have chatbots, we have machine learning and intelligent learning, and AI driving the next wave of workforce change. Then there's more. Then we have contactable wearables, we have the Internet of Things, we have artificial intelligence, robotics coming, and coming fast. And connecting us all is the data that we get from sensors and devices, drones, that shape the way that we work, or can shape the way we work, because that data is rich in information, and that information can give us insights, and that insights can allow us to change the way we work for the betterment of our products and services. Therefore, we can be more profitable, or we can improve reputation, or we can improve the value of our service, be it to industry, be it to from our universities to our students and academics. And what does that all mean for UK higher education is an interesting challenge. Here's some examples of digital disruption. These industries have been disrupted in various shapes and form. Uber, we all know about Uber from a taxi perspective. They don't own any taxis. Airbnb, they don't own any properties, but they quite happily bring a citizen closer to whatever accommodation service they need. And similarly, we've heard about Alibaba, we've got Facebook, Google, Apple, and they're data rich and they're technology organizations. Just to kind of give you my final area around digital disruption, and if you look at the top 5 publicly traded companies, here's their market cap and their size. And that's, if you look at the bottom there, 2016, we've got Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook. That was in 2016. Have a look at where they are now in 2018. Tencent has come along, they're a big Chinese conglomerate, and there's my prediction for 2023. But the big message here is technology. Technology is the one that's driving that change. So if we move on to my next slide, what we're going to do now is hopefully get some feedback from you colleagues on the different types of digital business models that you might have in your institutions or your organizations. And typically I've seen 3, and I show those in the slide now. Model 1, where you have the traditional enterprise. Well, there's some level of customer satisfaction, and the product and service that's been delivered is delivered through some business processes, and underpinning that there'll be technology which is typically developed through a software development lifecycle using waterfall, underpinned by IT systems that gives some efficiency and automation, and an underlying infrastructure that is that your IT function typically tries to keep stable. That's a digitized efficiency organization. That's model 1. On model 3, we've got an organization which is typically known as a digital native, a startup where there's much more enhanced customer experience. It's reinventing its business model in its market sector. It's using agile development techniques across the business as well as in IT. It's using Internet of Things to look at data, and it's using DevSecOps to manage its software development lifecycle and pipeline of continuous integration and development, and it uses big data and analytics to understand what's working and not working within the organization, underpinned by an infrastructure that's moved to the cloud where you can customize and configure some of SaaS applications with infrastructure as a code. And in the middle, you have a model, Model 2, which typically is a traditional enterprise who either requires a digital native to take up the market share and swallow a native, or actually then try to transform itself. And organizations I typically see Model 1, 2, and 3, and they either move from Model 1 to Model 3 or Model 3 to Model 2. Run our second poll to see where you think your organization is.
This is now open for responses. If we could please ask you to self-assess and let us know if you are Model 1, a traditional enterprise, Model 2, a hybrid enterprise, or Model 3, a digital enterprise. The results. So 53% say they are currently in a traditional enterprise, 40% say they are in a hybrid, and just 6% say they are in a digital enterprise.
Thank you. That it's pretty resounding that what I see in the industry is that organizations find it very hard to, and typically sit in Model 1. They find it hard to move to Model 2 and 3, and that's a whole chapter and a whole topic and a whole discussion around change management, which unfortunately we don't have the time to go into, but it just tells us that we are struggling in our organisation institutions to become digital, whilst the rapid adoption of technology or the pace of change increases. Here's some more examples, just quickly to run through this. Telemedicine, farming and banking, mobile apps, accessing loans and credit services is pretty much digital, i.e. can be done online. Farming, there's drones that monitor the development of crops these days and the weather, so that we can be reactive. Rather than be reactive, we can be predictive about how we feed our crops and grow them, and how we spray insecticides. And so, and in telemedicine, drones are now being, and wearables are being used to either transport medical services or understand the patient better, quicker, faster. So that's section 2. So what we've tried to do is give you an overview of the higher education sector. We've given you an overview of digital disruption and digital business models and where you might be in your organization. And what we're going to now talk about is section 3. It's about how the HE is being disrupted. And here's a little overview of some of the things that I've certainly picked up in my 8 to 10 years of working across a number of higher education institutions. I would say now the major driver for improving this customer experience or the student experience is that competitive landscape. I think the models that the universities have traditionally developed need to change, and change quickly and more rapidly than they are at the moment. As I mentioned before, Brexit has made UK less attractive certainly to EU and international students. We have a ranking system that ranks university according to certain criteria, which is more weighted for, I think, more closely for Russell Group universities. Providers are now developing online courses, MOOCs, and thinking about how to deliver education and knowledge in different ways, be that distance learning to on-premise or a hybrid of those. And they need to work out what is the best delivery method for the delivery of that knowledge to that student. There is if you look at the recent UCAS numbers for this year, there's been a decline in number of students applying, 18-year-olds going to university. They're down by 1.4%. And the biggest sector, the biggest segment of that's down is there's a lot of mature students are not now wanting to go to university, dissuaded by large student debt and prohibitive student fees in a way for them. And there's other providers now, as I said, competition, consultancies are now stepping up, and also this heavy regulation be it from a REF, TEF, and our Office of Students, which is still emerging, also dilutes the focus a little bit on improving that student experience. And just to give you a little bit of an example, some of the courses that we've seen, this course is now available from MOOCs, as I said. Cornell University are providing courses online. We've got the Western Governors Universities publishing their degree costs and their courses publicly, so that students can get value for money and consume what education they prefer. I use LinkedIn for training, and I think the lynda.com training on there is of excellent value for a small monthly fee. And we're also seeing a number of other trends. And at this point, I'm going to just hand over to Paul to talk about some of the things that he's seen in HE and some of the trends.
Thanks, Kuldip. One of the key things that I've seen in higher ed is actually around the intensified security requirements. And really, this is one of the challenges that we face in terms of the pressure between academic freedom, a bit of a tension between having more secure environments, and that pressure from monitoring people and resources. Certainly one of the challenges that universities have with tens of thousands of people accessing the internet is how do you monitor, how do you control, and just how far you want to go with that, because what works in a corporate context doesn't necessarily work in an academic context. One of the things that universities have found is certainly over recent years they're becoming increasingly targets for attacks, not just the IP question of getting the latest research, but actually a lot of it is about taking advantage of poor business processes normally to exploit the opportunity for fraud, to act as a mechanism to really get those security breaches in quite easily. You couple that with some of the things that are happening in terms of opportunities in research, big data, data science is probably one of the fastest growing areas in universities at the moment. And that's being driven by interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary scholarship, and an increased degree of working across the university. Now, you talked about Brexit being a bit of a challenge, and it is a challenge, particularly with that working across universities where traditionally we've worked either internationally or across Europe. There's going to be a greater need to work within UK universities, which can pose some of the challenges in terms of the breadth of research opportunities. We're seeing increased experimentation in teaching and learning. So you talked earlier about a vast range of university types, and you can range from one which takes a real approach to embedding digital, to making sure that information is available to all students and that the contact time is much more focused on the discussion, much more focused on the challenge, much more focused on students getting value out of the information, because as you pointed out, some of the challenges earlier around information being much more widely available. Students are expecting a more personalized approach, and that is a more interactive approach as well between them and their fellow students, students working in different areas, students working in different years, but also with the lecturers as well. So it isn't, students, while they want a personalised experience, they don't want that spoon feeding of information. And those two things are certainly linked. You couple that as well with the physical changes to various campuses. And for universities that are in a city campus, there are challenges in integrating with the rest of the environment, while you have local authorities who are pushing forward in a digital way that doesn't necessarily connect fully with universities, and that can form a bit of a tension. And finally, what we've got is the impact of those technology changes in the world applying to higher education. Social and mobile absolutely are right up there in terms of adoption, and many students are arriving, as most millennials and 18-year-olds are, fully conversant with social media, fully expecting to have an integrated social and learning experience, and universities are quite far behind in that, certainly in terms of delivering some of the material through video. So universities are quite slow, have been quite slow to adopt the cloud. There are a couple of key universities in the UK that have done so. But here it's about whether the cloud can actually be used by some universities to make a bit of a differentiation in the offer. There's an expectation for more open data, interoperability, and open interfaces. Universities have traditionally been very good at making sure that they're using open systems, but as we move towards a few set of collaboration environments, what we're finding is that they are becoming, to a degree, less interoperable, and there's an expectation that we'll choose one over another. And obviously, on top of all of that, we've got the increasing use of more personal devices, both by academics and professional services and by students. And that in itself is driving the IT provision in universities to be much more reactive and more modern in their approach.
Thank you, Paul. One of the other areas that we just wanted to bring across is that, as Paul mentioned, there are a wide range of devices and underlying technology infrastructure kind of changes around the cloud has caused the digital initiatives to kind of being focused on the CIO. And here's some data from the KPMG and Harvey Nash, where we've seen that customer engagement is top of the ladder. We've also seen, from a HE perspective, cybersecurity is a key challenge for that for institutions, as well as increasing revenue growth through larger intake of students and retaining students and enhancing that student, staff, and academic experience. But the challenge here is that if you look at the CIO is typically, there's 57% of CIOs sit on the board, but for HE, it's only 33%. Now, I think that's a significant challenge. If a technology is being rapidly adopted and it significantly can differentiate your university, I think the CIO needs to play a significant role on the boards, be in Senate, be in executive committees, to drive and influence the change that's required to bring about that experience that we're looking for. So what does that mean for digitalization, or in summary? What this slide just says is that the myriad of technology trends and the cultural changes we're looking in terms of improving the student citizen experience and the staff experience, and that demand for anytime computing and the consumerization is having an impact on the business of the institution as well as the IT function. And that in turn is asking UK higher education institutions to transform. And that, as Paul highlighted, that could be through looking at how to optimize the estates, how to look at the adoption of technology devices to make the digital experience better for the student, and therefore, and also the competitiveness around student attraction, so that you're attracting the better students. You need to think about how technology can act as a competitive advantage and differentiator for that institution. We're now going to move on to our case study, and I'm going to hand back again to Paul to talk about a leading Russell Group university where they've started embarking on this journey.
Okay, thanks very much, Kuldip. The leading Russell Group university I'm going to talk about is Durham University. Now, we talked earlier on about some of the challenges that those Russell Group universities have. Now, these are, of course, the top 24 research-intensive universities in the UK. They are particularly distinctive because they have a high proportion of the university income comes from research grants. Now, whether this is from the research councils or whether it's from private grants from the corporate sector isn't differentiated. The difference between these universities are they have a high proportion of research income, and this is reflected from the legislation from the REF. So the key thing about Durham is it's very distinctive. It is a collegiate university. It's slightly different from the two main collegiate universities of Oxford and Cambridge in that it has a significantly lower endowment. So it's in the same boat as many of the other Russell Group universities in terms of the income isn't coming from over a century's worth of endowment and land. It has 17,500 students, about 8,000 or so staff. The academic departments are organised into faculties covering science, arts and humanities, social science and health. It's a very well respected brand, Durham. It's absolutely up there in terms of being well known. There's a strong desire for international students to go there. Durham sets its tariff very high, along with other Russell Group universities. But it's in a very small location. Durham itself is a very small city. It has two very distinct feels when feeling about the city when the students are there and when they're not. But the university wants to expand. It's grown organically over the past 10, 15 years. And it really does see growth on the areas that it holds as strength. So it does have strong sciences, but it, of course, is particularly strong in arts and humanities and in social sciences. It's a very distinctive university, 78th in the QS World Rankings at the time. Obviously, that goes with the earlier comment around world rankings being somewhat skewed. The challenges that Durham has is that, like many organisations generally, they traditionally hadn't invested in their IT. This was an issue where the IT was broadly not quite fit for purpose. They'd kicked off some work and had secured a lot of investment before I arrived there. And this formed part of a New World programme, which was designed to be a foundation programme. So it was making sure that the infrastructure within the university was flexible, was able to cope with the demand of the student body as it currently stood, also to cope with the increase in technology that was going to be deployed. And it was also around bringing in some things that university were quite late in terms of deploying. So campus-wide Wi-Fi was relatively poor, and that was taken quite quickly within the space of 18 months, from being quite poor to very pervasive, high speed, and it was actually voted the best Wi-Fi on campus in the International Student Survey in 2017. Obviously, of course, that's now over 18 months ago, so they need to be moving forward on that. There's a bit of a legacy, both in terms of IT for student-facing systems, but also for academic and supporting the organisation's business processes. So some of the key systems that were in place around people management, around financial management, weren't fit for purpose, certainly not to enable the university to move forward and grow in the direction they wanted to. And the IT organisation was in a very poor place in terms of how they were perceived by professional service colleagues and academic colleagues. There'd been a bit of a legacy of failure to deliver IT in the past, and you couple that with the poor engagement between the IT organisation and the rest of the university, and there was no real sign that anything was going to particularly improve. So one of the things that we did in kicking things off with Durham was to look at where they were in terms of overall IT maturity. Now, this is not about digital transformation necessarily, but it's actually about getting that baseline, because of course what's transformation for Durham could be really quite low level transformation compared to more digitally adept organisations. And Durham certainly is a Model 1 organisation, very, very traditional. As part of that initial assessment, it was quite low. So somewhere between very, very basic and best effort, with some areas of control. So Durham had quite a good incident management process, if we're using ITIL terms. It was relatively okay at defining projects. They let itself down. The team struggled in terms of timely delivery. So projects would get created, they would get started, and they'd end up going around in constant loops with conversations that would then go back to design stage rather than moving forward on delivery. The target state for the organisation was to be much more strategic, to be that value-added business partner. Any IT organisation will want to have that, because The pervasiveness of technology means that without an agile and engaging business partner in your IT team, you're going to look elsewhere. And that can be more expensive, it can be cheaper. Within the short space of time before we embarked on the transformation side of it, we've moved Durham up through to a more standardized model. And there were signs that it was likely to improve, but it was never going to be more than that middle state of IT managed as a business and not really driving the value out of IT, not really helping to create the value within the organization. And the key thing for Durham was actually all about change. The transformation program that came about was focused on a new target operating model. And they're all of the issues that we face every day around change. It's around how we built that target operating model through listening to the key stakeholders, which started out with getting senior level buy-in with the executive team at Durham, going around all of the academic departments and faculties, involving them in what the future might look like. So that listening, that involving, helped to co-create what might have been there. And one of the things that was missing was an overarching governance model for IT. So creating an IT steering committee as a very early activity certainly helped to have a focus at an executive level and make sure that the decision making at that level was appropriate, and that those decisions that didn't need to be made as part of that steering committee could be devolved. This helped to empower certainly the IT team and help them improve their confidence moving forwards. So the context of Durham is that the organisation had a new vice-chancellor that developed a new strategy for the university. This was where the future direction of growth was, and consolidation into a single campus, and that helped to drive the IT strategy. There was a transformation roadmap associated with that had key systems that needed to be replaced, timing for those systems, and this was particularly around both the staff and student systems, but also for managing research. We had to, as part of the IT strategy, develop what the investment framework would look like, and we secured, as part of that, through the university governance mechanism, an investment of 20 million plus over 5 years. And associated with that was a detailed transformation plan. Now, the university, as part of the university strategy, had an operational excellence improvement initiative. This was designed to look at the business processes from the university side and basically use technology to improve those processes as we went along. So that was quite a well-governed program. And the IT strategy slotted into that very nicely. And what we ended up with was a digital roadmap over the next 10 years. This matched the university strategy, and it ranged from, in 2017, getting the IT strategy endorsed with and kicking off the IT transformation program, prioritizing the IT systems, developing a new target operating model for IT, which was one of the most interesting aspects because there was a degree of devolved IT within particularly those science departments, and the model for engagement needed a radical overhaul from the one that was originally in place, which, while better than the initial lack of engagement, needed to have a much more collaborative approach, particularly with those science departments. But going through that, the key systems around making sure that the student record system was upgraded, that the research information system was replaced, and that the university's key line of business app, which was Oracle Financials, was migrated to the cloud. The key thing around this was that the timing, because all three of those were very large systems implementations, and the timing of them needed to be shaped such that they didn't impinge on each other, and there was no change fatigue for those professional services staff and academic staff who would be using them. Obviously, as the digital roadmap moved out towards 2022, there's more of a innovative approach around not just replacing systems, but bringing in the new wave of systems and new technology enablement on the campus. So we started to explore some of the IoT technologies, how we might use some of the analytics around Wi-Fi and around student use to look at student flow, and some of the things that were starting to come out, while couldn't quite make it into a solid proposal for the roadmap, would certainly expected those in the future. And I think that's me done, and back to you, Kuldip.
Thank you, Paul, for that insight. I'm just going to kind of try to wrap up a couple of slides and some takeaways from this webinar, take into consideration what we talked about around the rapid adoption of technology and how that's disrupting market sectors, and then how that plays into HE as well. So what we've put together here is some of the kind of key facets that we think are really important for UK higher education institutions to embrace if they're going on this digital stroke IT transformation kind of journey. One, I think it's very important that the university understands what its business model is. What kind of university is it? Is it a mass elite? Is it an elite university? Is it a mass university? Is it a distance learning university? What type of university is it? And that's where you really need to understand your customers, be they staffs, academics, students, and how you can improve that customer experience. I think with the rapid adoption of technology, I think there needs to be a seat at the board level for IT to influence the overall digital transformation approach, and that vision and strategy needs to be clearly communicated and evolved right through the institutional organisation. And once those vision and missions are clear, it can then drive the right behaviours in the organisation so that it brings around that cultural change. As Paul talked about in terms of technology investment, you can see a lead university in Durham here absolutely investing in the technology side, and technology investment enablement can, in their view, can actually differentiate it. And two other key things: getting generational buy-in. If you think about it, the number of generations at university start from the age of 18 to up to some of our senior members up to 70. So you've got a whole range from the maturists to the generation X, Y, and Z, the millennials, the baby boomers. You have to think about how you're going to engage all those different types of stakeholders across those demographics. And using data, I think data is really important in terms of how we can use data to get insight for the organisation to bring about the change. And my final slide, there's some tips that we've picked up as we've gone on our journey, making sure that we know what the strategic orientation is, being results driven, being commercially agile, providing inspirational leadership so that you take people on that journey, you excite them, you motivate them, you incentivize them, you influence, collaborate, be as agile as you can, you think of that customer centricity and use data to give you the insights. With that said, I'd like to just bring it to an end.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into a question and answer session, which is going to be led by Paul.
Okay, so there have been a couple of questions, so thank you very much for those. Firstly, Kuldip, what are DevSecOps?
Okay, so DevSecOps. So in the software development world, traditionally a lot of software development organizations have used waterfall methodologies. You've got the requirements phase, the design phase, the test, code test, and delivery. That's the traditional waterfall approach for developing software systems and applications. A lot of organizations now have moved towards agile techniques. And the Agile Manifesto, which came out in 2001, talks about continuous integration and development of small bite-sized pieces, chunks of systems code, and you build that up and you work through that, work with the client to build that up. That's agile software development. So then more recently, software development organizations have been moving from agile to integrating development function and the operations function. So agile's moved to in the kind of integration of the development departments you see in IT and the operations because bringing them closer together so that they can collaborate and co-create. And as they develop that system or that change to that system, they're working very, very closely. And then embedded into that is the third piece, is the second piece, is security. You're trying to ensure, because cybersecurity is a big issue in the industry, how can you build in security early in the life cycle so you're building an application or system that is secure for when it's released. That's what DevSecOps tries to do.
Okay, thank you, Kuldip. And there is another question around, sorry, this question has just slipped off my screen for a second. How do universities deal with the differences in demand from students who may have a higher demand for technology, as well as those, for example, mature students who are not very confident in using IT? I'm happy to take this, Kuldip.
Yeah, sure.
I think what I think universities try and do is offer a very baseline level of approach. So they understand that anybody who receives IT services will range from those with very low demand to quite high demand. What we did in Durham was take an approach which was we would provide lots of information on the intranet, lots of how-to, lots of help documents. We'd also operate an IT service desk, which spent probably about 30% of the time dealing with those questions of how do I do this. But we also had an on-site help desk, which allowed those people who needed more support, more help on a one-to-one basis to get that help, and they could book appointments. What we've also done in Durham is we tried to take an approach of dealing with issues as early as we possibly could. So at the start of every term, and certainly every year, there was a lot of time in the IT team invested in one-to-one kickoff sessions for all students. So bring your device along, we'll get you connected to the network, we'll sort you out with antivirus, we'll give you a run through over all of the systems you need to use while you're at universities. And broadly, that seemed to meet the two ends of demand of having information available for people who can self-serve and one-to-one support for those students who were less confident in using IT. So thank you for those, Jocelyn. Cool. In an ideal world, how is the uptake of new technology decided? Is it society that shapes this, or is it technology that drives change in the way society uses it? Leaves the argument of social shaping versus technology determinism.
Can you just repeat that question? That's quite a hefty question.
Yeah. So in an ideal world, how is the uptake of technology decided? Does society shape the technology, or does technology drive the change in society?
Oh, okay. I think it's the uptake. I think I'd venture towards that. So I think it's driven by, humans wanting to make the most of it, and they see value in that technology or that system or the application. So, let's think about the Pokemon Go game, right? So kids rapidly wanted to use that game because it provided them with that entertainment. And similarly with the mobile device, Apple, then we had iPhones to Samsung devices to, humans are the ones that are the ones who decide that technology really is the one that gives them the value and helps society as well as institutions or organizations in whatever shape or form. So I think it's driven by demand from a human perspective. And then similarly, I think, as a leaving statement around this, we need to be thinking about what does robotics and AI and machine learning mean for us, and how do we manage and govern that as those kind of technologies emerge into the market?
Okay, thank you, Kuldip. There are a few questions that are specifically at me, so I'll pick those up now. Jenna asks, have Durham benchmarked themselves in terms of IT maturity against other universities external of the UK, and where do they think they stand? While we were doing some of the research for the IT strategy at Durham, we did benchmarking against universities in the UK, both Russell Group and non-Russell Group. We benchmarked against corporate organisations in terms of internal IT provision, but yes, we did benchmark against some international universities, primarily in the US, but also some of the Asian and Australian universities. The reason we chose those universities is that they were the universities that we benchmarked the university strategy against. So we had that same cohort of benchmark groups. I think one of the things about Durham is that in terms of the IT, we found that we were generally below everybody when we started. And for some of those more traditional universities that we benchmark against in the UK, we were level, certainly after the first bit of work around the New World Programme and that foundation technology. Against other Russell Group universities, we were about the same, more or less the same. Australian universities were ahead of us, and we were about the middle of some of those US comparators. It really depends upon the particular areas of IT that those universities had chosen to focus on. And certainly what we took from all of that was an overview of where we wanted Durham's destination to be, picking the best from those universities in that benchmark cohort. Another question for me is my view on the future of multi-tenancy cloud student record systems. While I was at Durham, we took the approach that we were really going to embrace cloud. It's a great opportunity, as many universities have, to use both Google's and Microsoft's offer for students. It's so cheap that you'd be mad not to take advantage of that opportunity. But Durham had always shied away from using any multi-tenancy cloud system at all. While we were there, we set the direction for Durham was going to be cloud, started heading down the Oracle ERP cloud route, and we were certainly exploring cloud-based student record systems at the time. I think as a market, it was maturing, and I think any university that really does want to embrace cloud has to embrace it on that basis, a multi-tenancy cloud. The challenge, of course, is how averse the university is to the security aspects of it, and that's a question for their specific universities. I'm very conscious that we're coming close to time, and possibly just have time for one more question. And in an organisation undergoing change, Kuldip, how important is training and communication with stakeholders when compared to a self-taught mentality or an intuitive to use platform amongst younger users?
Wow, fantastic question. Yes, I mean, having worked in change a lot, I can't underestimate the value of communicating early and clearly to all your stakeholder groups, and they are different. I just wonder if I can just quickly show you one of the slides I didn't show, which I've got up on my screen. I don't know, which shows all the different types of generations of people, and effectively you've got to communicate differently to different types. And you'll see a little column there that says communication media. I think some of the older ones of us probably like to communicate maybe through a formal letter or pick up the phone and let's talk, whereas some of the younger generation will quite happily communicate text, SMS, WhatsApp, hand gestures, and email. Even emails becoming defunct in some organisations. I heard some organisations don't want to use email; they want to use collaboration tools now. I don't know if you've heard of Slack. Slack's becoming a very popular communication tool in software development world. So yes, communication absolutely important for change. You know, it's about informing the right audience type or with the right information at the right time, and I think you need to tailor your approach according to the type of generation that you're communicating with as well. Okay,
thanks for that, Kuldip. I think we're probably running out of time now. There are a couple of questions that we haven't got to, but we can certainly respond to those offline.
Hey, Hamza here. Thank you very much, Kuldip and Paul, for the session this afternoon. We are definitely running out of time very quickly. I think we've just gone 1:30 now. So as I mentioned at the top of this session, we will have the recording and other bits put up on the website shortly after. Everyone who attended will receive an email letting them know when that's there. So just to say thank you very much to Kuldip and Paul and everyone attending. Please do interact with us through the APM. Thank you very much.